Now let's take you back to our top story. Economic Freedom Fighters leader Julius Malema is planning legal action after he was found guilty of discharging a firearm in public. Malema faces a possible 15 years behind bars. Just what are Malema's legal options? To discuss this with us, we are joined by legal analyst, Advocate Zola Majavu. Advocate, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And before we even get to Julius Malema's legal options, what did you make of the judgment itself?
Just a quick correction. I don't practice as an advocate. There's a huge issue in my profession. I'm a senior legal practitioner, practicing as an attorney. Thank you for the opportunity and good afternoon to the viewers out there. I think the first thing to note is that these legal proceedings have not yet been finalized. So until he is sentenced, this criminal case is regarded as still being partly heard. However, the options available to him at this stage, pre-sentencing, are one, to obtain reports from suitably qualified professionals in the form of social workers, correctional supervision officers, who would produce reports that seek to persuade the court that he is a candidate worthy of serving his sentence, whatever it may be, outside of the prison cells. And that is precisely why Advocate Lawrence Holders, on his behalf, correctly indicated to the court that they wish to apply for pre-sentencing reports, which would then have to be taken into account alongside a basket of considerations before the magistrate can then issue the sentence that she would regard as appropriate. Once that sentence has been passed, one or two things can happen. Either Mr. Malema, if he is sentenced to direct imprisonment, he will be whisked away down to the court cells so that he can then be taken to the appropriate correctional center where he will start serving his sentence. The other alternative, which is the most likely scenario, is they will immediately apply for leave, permission to appeal, which, if granted, it will be immediately followed by an application for his bail to be extended pending the finalization of his appeal. The difference at that stage would be he would now be a convicted and sentenced offender whose liberty must now be taken away from him unless the court grants him bail. This will not happen now. It will only happen once the sentencing procedure is finalized. And we can accept that he is likely to appeal all the way to the High Court, to the Supreme Court of Appeal, and even to the Constitutional Court, which he is perfectly entitled to do.
Yeah, so just looking at that appeal option as well, which we know he's already said that he will be pursuing that avenue, that could also take a while longer than the 23rd of January.
Oh, definitely. Look, it can, at best, it will only happen after the 23rd of January. And assuming that having listened to the arguments in aggravation by the state and in mitigation by his defense counsel, the magistrate would be in a position to render her decision on sanction at that time. She had already alluded to the fact that given the submissions that may still be made, she may not be able to give sanction on the day. So it is also likely that after the 23rd, she may reserve her ruling with regard to the appropriate sanction. And until that happens, then Mr. Malema's bail is extended until the day he is formally sentenced by a court of law. And only at that stage will his appeal rights kick in. And I can almost assure you that that is exactly what they would do. So we are not about to see him wearing orange overalls anytime soon, if that is what is likely to happen. Yes, the charge for which he has been convicted requires a mandatory jail sentence. What it would be, nobody knows. It will only be made known once the magistrate has had regard to the submission by the state, the submission by his counsel, as well as the pre-sentence reports that hopefully would have been sourced and obtained on that day. So we're still in it for a long haul.
And just when it comes to his co-accused as well, his former bodyguard, we saw that he got acquitted today. With this case continuing for Mr. Malema himself, would that completely exclude now the bodyguard, the former bodyguard?
He is the minute the magistrate declared him not guilty, at that stage, he was even entitled to stand up and leave. But he opted to stay. You'll remember the magistrate said he is excusing him as well as his legal counsel. But I think courtesy and protocol dictates that you wait until there is final pronouncement on the entire proceedings. So we are unlikely to see him in court. If he does go to court, it will be to pledge solidarity and support to his protege, and he will be sitting not in the dock, but he will be sitting somewhere in the gallery. But what I also find very interesting is the reasoning of the magistrate, in my view, and with respect. I am battling to understand on what basis she would have acquitted the bodyguard who admittedly, on the evidence before her, which she has admitted, is the one who handed Mr. Malema this firearm, whether a toy or real. And then Mr. Malema is then convicted of possession and discharging that particular firearm, which the originator or the person was originally licensed to carry, handed over to Malema, who may or may not even be competent to handle such a firearm. And I'm just finding that logic a bit puzzling. But I am not casting aspersions on the magistrate. She was thorough in analyzing the evidence before her. But if you ask me, there's a reasonable chance that Mr. Malema might succeed on appeal. However, he is also the author of his own misfortune. He's a dear brother, a leader that I respect, but he was a bit casual and almost flippant in his responses. And that might have also counted against him, because at the end of the day, when the court is confronted with two versions, the accused person is entitled to the benefit of the doubt, provided that his version cannot be found to be reasonably not possibly true in all respects. And for the court to give it that benefit, you have to at least rebut the evidence of the state and put a version that, even if not completely believable, cannot be discounted as possibly not reasonably true. And I think there Mr. Malema did himself a bit of a disservice. And I think I'm fortified in that observation because the magistrate also referenced some of the examples by way of responses to very simple questions that he could have just answered with less showboating. But he was perfectly entitled to answer the way he did. It's easy for us to criticize from a position of comfort as armchair critics, but I think as a lawyer, that might have also played a role in tilting the scales against the probability of his version. But I also hasten to say that I found the reasoning of the presiding officer a bit incongruent in some instances. So there's a real chance that on appeal, the matter might be concluded differently if she does grant leave. If she doesn't grant them leave to appeal, of course it is open to Mr. Malema to petition the Supreme Court of Appeals for such leave, which I think in all probability it would be granted, because if you're about to take a man's freedom for 15 years, the courts would not readily deny you the constitutional entrenched rights to vindicate yourself. But at the moment, it's still early days. We can all wait for the finalization of the sentencing part of these proceedings. At that point, then this criminal trial by Mr. Malema can be deemed to have been finalized, and that would be the end of the road for this particular presiding officer. She will only have one bite of it in the form of an application for leave to appeal being made before her again. If she grants it, that is the end of her role. If she doesn't grant it, that is still the end of her role, because then Mr. Malema can then petition the Supreme Court of Appeal. But I think on the whole, his defense put up a good fight, excellent defense team, excellent lawyering, but you can only do so much for a client who is in the witness box.
Yeah, a long journey ahead indeed. Thank you so much, Mr. Majavu, for explaining that to us as well. That, of course, is a senior legal practitioner, Zola Majavu.